Hey, how's everyone doing? I am so grateful that you are here. My name is Dustin Hurst. I'm the Vice President for 2 more days at the Idaho Freedom Foundation. And I am so grateful that you have taken time out of your schedule to be here for this special night. Thank you so much. Before we kick things off, I need to say, express my gratitude for those who have made this possible. First of all, let's take a second and give a round of applause to the team here at Valley Church and the security team. They graciously offered up this venue at no cost and said, we will secure this venue so that our wonderful special speaker is protected, and I'm so grateful for them and their hard work. There's a myriad of people I could thank, I suppose, but thank you to everybody who was involved with putting this on. After spending the last couple hours with Chloe, I can tell you that she's as real as she comes off to be, and she is so passionate about this. This is a message that needs to be heard, and it needs to be heard widely, and that's why we're here tonight. This is very personal for Chloe, as it is for many of us. This week, as we've prepared for this, I can tell you that I've had parents who called and they said, hey, my kid's been through this, or my kid is thinking about this, please help me. I need my kid to hear this message. Thank you for bringing Chloe here. This isn't your ordinary political speech. This isn't about beating the liberals and making them cry big tears. That's not what this is about. This is about saving our kids. Right? I have 3 kids of my own, and I hope that I never have to deal with this. I might, I don't know. But I am so thankful that there are people that are courageous like Chloe who speak up against this stuff, who have no problem telling the truth and telling what transitioning really means and what happens when you discover it's all a lie. We have a great show, an important show for you tonight. And again, I'm so thankful that you're here with us. What we're going to do, I'll give you the quick run of events. We're going to have Heidi Pearson is going to give us the Pledge of Allegiance. Where's the flag? I don't even know where the flag is. Thank you. And then Misty Carlfelt is going to introduce Pastor Tim, who will give us the opening prayer. Then we'll hear from, you may have seen him on Fox News, Senator Chris Trankel. Chris, you may have seen on this somewhat viral video clip, was taking it to a school board who has no idea what they're doing. So we'll hear an update on that situation and any legislation. And he will introduce Chloe Cole. We'll do, after Chloe's speech, we'll do a quick Q&A, maybe 2 to 3 questions. I will tell you, some of you have asked, can I meet with her afterwards? It's probably not going to happen tonight. She's been up since 3:30. She didn't sleep on the plane. So she is powering through this just to be here and give this speech. So I apologize in advance, but she needs some rest, and I need to get her back to her hotel, and I hope you understand. So then after that, we'll close the meeting. And again, thank you so much for being here. We'll turn it over to Heidi for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I talk really loud, so I'm not even going to use the microphone. So if we all want to just right here. Yeah. We all know the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm Misty Carlfelt. I'm with Health Freedom Idaho. Hey! So many of my church family and my political family are here tonight. It just feels like a family reunion for me. This is my home church. This is where I worship with my church family and some of my political family too. And I'm just really proud to call this my church home. I called Pastor Lynn and I told him about the opportunity. He didn't even skip a beat. He didn't even draw a breath. He was like, absolutely, let me check the calendar. Quick text back, absolutely, you can have it here. Like Dustin said, didn't charge us, didn't make it hard. In fact, they made it so easy. It's my honor and privilege to introduce to you Pastor Tim. He has been my kids' youth pastor. And I feel like it's so fitting for him to open us with prayer. Pastor Tim.
All right, would you close your eyes and bow your heads with me? So, Father God, we thank you for this amazing opportunity to be able to hear a word of righteousness to us today, that we can speak identity, true identity to our children, that we do this not just for ourselves, but for our children's children. So we just say that today, let every word that is said, let it just resonate with us, let it come down deep inside of us, that we can be able to stand against every agenda, every lie from the enemy that's coming after our kids. Me having my own 4 kids, I want them to grow up knowing they are called of God, they are chosen, they are redeemed, they are loved. And so we just speak that over our whole entire valley tonight, that these words that are spoken is going to be heard all across the valley, that the Treasure Valley is going to be a starting ground, a place of hearing truth of God, of hearing your word and hearing it, not just from Chloe Cole, but it's going to be able to come into our hearts to be able to speak to others around us. So we thank you for it. We say a special blessing over Chloe, strength over her body, and good rest tonight. And we also say over every single person here that just let the words that are said, let it fall on good soil tonight, that we can hear your words. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. And everybody said amen? Amen. All right. Cool.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Senator Tracco, for those that don't know, and I can just say the outpouring of people that showed up tonight is amazing. And it's just spectacular to see all of you take a vested interest in this and what's going on. Many of you do know right now that the Caldwell School Board and myself have made the news. And so what was great about that is this policy has been in Idaho since 2015, all right? And there are many school districts that currently have this policy and have had the policy on the books as far back as 2015. Council just recently rescinded the policy. Cascade School District is rehearing on this policy now with parents pushing pressure on them. I've been working with parents from Cascade and asking how they fight against this, and now they've got it back on the agenda, and hopefully that gets overturned as well. As you all know, the Attorney General, Raul Labrador, is very much involved in this. I've been working with his office, and we are coordinating on how we fight this stuff. And with that being said, talking today, he says legislation. Start bringing about legislation. And I'm here to tell you some good news tonight. We have legislation being worked on and legislation being brought forward that will handle this situation. Personally, does this debate need to be at the school boards? Does it need to be at that level? No, it should be at the state. So the state has failed in that position of setting guidance for the schools to go forward. And good graces of their own, they attempted to do what they thought would protect them. Unfortunately, it was the incorrect move to do such a thing. We got to remember, the teachers at these schools, they want to teach. They love the children, all right? They want to nourish the children. I pray that the school boards are the same way. It's the Idaho School Board Association accepting federal monies, federal funds, federal strings to put these policies in place. The problem is who stops that policy? Who puts a brake on there and says, wait a minute, this is not for our children, this is not for our kids. Unfortunately, It took 2,000 people showing up to a meeting and a senator getting angry with a board to make the spotlight on this. It should never have happened. But that's what it took to get it on the news. Unfortunately, today's day in society. So what I'm getting back tonight is the young woman that's going to come and speak has been through this process of what the left is trying to do to our children and the policies that's putting on and attacking those children and this I'm just going to say it, ungodly. There's no way if Jesus was here would approve of anything like this, and I think we all know that. And we do know 18:6, Matthew 18:6, go get a weight stone and drown yourself in the river is probably better than what you'll receive when the Lord comes home. That being said, what she's about to talk tonight, she's got an amazing amount of courage, an amazing amount of strength, because she's getting attention from all over the country, and it's not all good. Unfortunately, the majority of it's probably bad. We know the left likes to tolerate and bring everybody in unless you don't agree with their views, and then they attack you very violently and quite nastily. So unfortunately, this girl probably has more courage than myself and the Marines that stormed Fallujah back in 2004. So my hat's off to her. With that being said tonight, I just want you to remember things as you listen to her speak tonight. And her message is she is trying to save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of children from going through what what she was forced to go through, is that the government is using its position to take away parent authority, manipulate parents into these procedures. Doctors are buying into it because of money, and they want you to be polite about it. This is the time for righteous anger. All right? So with that, I am extremely humbled and honored to introduce tonight Chloe Cole to come and speak and give her message to all of you. So I hope you all listen and open your hearts to her and let her feel welcomed here and the love that is in this room for her. So thank you.
Hello. Don't mind me if I'm a little bit slow tonight. I just came in from a flight, and I've been up since about 3 a.m. Central, and I've been traveling for about 2 weeks now. So, but my name is Chloe Cole, and I am an 18-year-old detransitioner from the Central Valley of California. I'm biologically female, but I began to socially transition into a male identity starting at the age of 12. And at 13, I started medically transitioning by taking puberty blockers and testosterone. And at 15, I went on to have a double mastectomy just after my sophomore year of high school. I stopped transitioning at 16, and I've been speaking out about my experience going through the process of medically transitioning as a minor and against this practice of harming children. I come to speak from a place of understanding and compassion, and I feel a lot of love for children and young adults who are suffering from gender dysphoria. It's not easy. It's not fun. It's a debilitating mental health issue, and it is excruciating to go through. I wouldn't wish this feeling on my worst enemy. To anybody in the audience who may be struggling with these feelings, I love you. My heart goes out to you. And I want you to know that mutilation and sterilization of your body is going to do you more harm than good in the long term. I'll get to the specifics of everything that I've been through, but first I think it's important to provide a bit of background. Excuse me. I'm the youngest of 5, and because of the influence of my older brothers, I've always had a bit of a tomboyish streak. I started puberty fairly early. I was no older than about 8 or 9 years old, and I was subject to comments on my developing body from family, adults, and peers alike. I grew very conscious of myself, and I started to compare myself to my older sisters and friends and images of women on social media. Growing up, I would often hear other girls and women talk about the experience of being female in a very negative light. It was always about how awful things like periods and puberty and pregnancy and childbirth were and so on. And I would often hear phrases like, men have it so much easier. Why was I born as a girl? And this kind of sentiment made me fearful of growing from a girl into a woman, and I couldn't imagine myself even living as one. I was introduced to the idea that men can become women and vice versa very soon after I started using social media at 11. A lot of the content that I was seeing on platforms like Instagram was reinforcing my already negative feelings about being a female. But once I learned that there was a way out, it pretty much hit the nail in the coffin, and I started cutting my hair short and wearing more clothing out of the boys section before I changed my name and eventually came out to my parents in a letter. They had a lot of concern about this. They wanted to support me, but they hadn't really heard anything like this before from me. And they wanted to figure out where this idea that their daughter was actually a boy came from. They decided that it would be best to seek professional help. But these feelings were never explored, and instead, they were lied to by my doctors. They presented transition as the only means of treating my dysphoria, and they said that the rate of regret was less than 1%. And when my dad pushed back on the idea and asked why it couldn't wait until I was legally an adult, he and my mom were told that if I were not allowed to go through this, then I would be at a very high risk of suicide. Which wasn't true. I wasn't suicidal until I was put on the treatments. But we were given the impression that I would become happier and healthier and more whole through transition. But this didn't happen. I grew more and more depressed, and by the time I was in my sophomore year, I was diagnosed with depression and social anxiety, and they started to medicate me. And very soon after this, I started feeling a desire to get a double mastectomy. Before this point in time, I had been binding my breasts for about 2 years using a compression device called a binder. And when I first started transitioning, I never really cared to because I wasn't that particularly developed, and I was on the thinner side, and I would often wear loose shirts and hoodies, and I never thought anybody would notice. But there was an incident with a boy in 8th grade when I was early in my transition. He had been bullying me over the course of the school year, and one day he had actually assaulted me. And from that day on, I wanted to hide that part of my body. I never wanted to be visible to the world ever again. And so I started using a binder, and I would wear this every day whenever I would go out of the house, whenever we would have people over, and whenever I was out exercising or swimming. And I live in California, right in the middle of it, and it gets, on some of the worst days, about 115 degrees. So naturally, I got pretty sick of wearing this thing, and I wanted to be free of it. I genuinely believed myself to be just like any other boy my age, and I wanted my appearance to match that. And so I sought a consultation with a surgeon. Just after my sophomore year ended, I went under the knife, and my breasts were removed. Up until this point, I didn't have any negative feelings about my transition. But just a few months afterward, I started to realize that I missed some of the little things about being a woman. very simple things like having my hair long or wearing women's clothing or makeup. But by this point in time, I had already been on testosterone for a few years, and everybody around me knew me as a boy. I didn't even look like a girl by this point in time, and I had a lot of shame around these feelings. It wasn't until my junior year when I started to realize that what exactly went wrong. All it took to dissuade me from going further was taking a class in psychology. And in my psychology class, I learned about things like parenting, maternity, the maternal instinct, and the cognitive development of children and teens. It was the first time that I really had thought about the possibility of having children for myself and what being a parent might look like for me. I was told during my consultations with the endocrinologist and the surgeon that I may lose my ability to naturally mother children and I will not be able to breastfeed. But this meant nothing to me because I didn't know what this meant. I didn't know the importance of either of these things. But I learned that breastfeeding and physical affection in general are a very key factor in the bond between mother and child, and this bond goes on to affect how a child develops socially, cognitively, and emotionally. And I would never be able to have this experience ever. I really do wish that I had been taught about these things before I was allowed to go forward with transitioning as a kid. At this point, I decided I couldn't keep living like this, and I immediately stopped taking testosterone. And I wasn't sure what to do with myself then. But I knew now that I wasn't a boy. I would always be female. And in fact, that was really all I wanted to be. By this point in time, COVID had already hit, and my relationships with my friends at school had been seriously affected by it, and all I really had was the internet. And I began to talk about my experience transitioning and my regret from it online. And this community of people who I once thought supported me and loved me began to turn on me. I was told that I was stupid, that I should have known what I was doing to myself, and that I deserved to feel this way. And in speaking out, they told me that I was harming a whole community of people. And so, for a while, I stopped. But at the same time, I also started to speak to other people who were in a situation quite like mine, in that they had either gone through a social transition or medical transition, and they too had regretted it. Not only that they regretted it, but also that they were physically harmed by it. And I realized I was being lied to. This happens a lot more frequently than people talk about. And I wasn't harming anybody in speaking out. There are many other people in this situation. And so I decided to start speaking out again. I told my doctors that I came out again to the team of physicians and therapists who had helped me get to this point in the first place. But I was offered no support. I was offered no guidance in the process of detransitioning, and I had to figure it out all for myself. In the past year, I even told my surgeon that I felt like I shouldn't have been allowed to go through with it, and that to this day, I'm still experiencing complications from it. Still, I was offered no help. His response was to tell me to put Vaseline over my chest. And that was all I was given. Children all have a right to grow up into healthy adults who are able to function socially, emotionally, and physically, fully. I was robbed of this right, and thousands of other children have been or will be as well. It is not right that we continue to experiment on children in this way and interfere with the growth of their bodies and minds. Several U.S. states are beginning to ban the transitioning of children, but this is not an issue that can be solved with legislation alone. We need to show love to our children who are suffering from distress with their gender and to guide them through these feelings. Thank you all for coming to listen today. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll hold the mic for whoever you want to call upon.
Yeah, so I'll be answering a few questions if anybody has any.
What would you have liked to, or what support would you have liked to have been shown, or what do you think would have been a better way for people around you to support you when you were having these feelings?
I think the biggest problem was that I didn't really have any support from the medical professionals. I didn't receive any guidance on how to stop taking hormones and what the process might look like from there. I had to request my own blood tests for hormones, and they stopped doing that just a while after I had stopped hormones. And even my therapist and the gender specialist who had referred me to the surgeon just really didn't say much to me when I would talk about my regret and having wished that I hadn't been through this. And I feel like that's due in part due to the laws in California. As part of the conversion therapy laws, you're not allowed to suggest any treatments other than transitioning for gender dysphoria. I also wish that my friends who were in the trans community or considering themselves allies of this community, some of them did listen to me, and they were able to separate their own experiences from mine and accept that this is how it affected me and not take offense to it. But there are many more who cut me off just for talking about my experience. And I wish it weren't that way. I wish that they didn't feel like they had to do that.
Thank you, Chloe, for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. I am a therapist, so my question is going to kind of hit on that. Realizing that the laws here currently are different than in California. I'm curious about your thoughts. I mean, obviously, you said that they didn't have the ability by law to do anything other than affirm your dysphoria. I'm noticing that in the continuing education training that is coming along now, there is a huge push for affirming care. That's what they like to call it. I don't like that term. But I'm curious about your thoughts in terms of your experience with your therapist and your medical team. If there was any hint that they felt like their hands were tied.
Yeah, I actually had an endocrinologist. The first one who I was referred to for hormones and blockers actually refused to put me on the treatments because he said that it might stunt my brain development. But I heard this from nobody else. No, I can do more.
Okay. Anybody over here?
You just mentioned your endocrinologist and what he said. One of the risk factors for advanced osteoporosis is early hysterectomies and things like that. Did your endocrinologist mention anything along the lines of the long-term damage that can occur by causing early onset, basically what amounts to menopause?
Yeah.
They did cover that as a...
Yeah, for all three of the treatments that I went under, I was given consent forms with a list of side effects on all of them. But, I mean, aside from them, a lot of it being pretty vague, I just wasn't able to make an informed decision on anything like that because of my age. I mean, I was hardly fully developed, and at the age I was, I didn't really have any worldly knowledge or experience. And it was hard to know which of these side effects I would eventually experience because I was a perfectly healthy kid before. I mean, some of the complications that I'm facing to this day weren't even listed on the forms.
This young lady has a question for you.
So along with that question, he kind of stole it from me though. Do you know of any, like, you've obviously probably done a lot of research on this, like, do you know of like any hard long-term effects of, you know, not just in your experience, but like in others, detransitioning, like the extremely long-term effects, like if it shortens the lifespan, if it causes a uptake of cancers or anything like that, would you know of?
I mean, there really isn't much long-term research on the effects of things like puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones on the opposite sex. But, I mean, in men who take testosterone because they have a deficiency or women who take birth control, these are hormones that are of their natal sex. And even so, there's still an increased risk of cancer.
Hi, Chloe. Thank you so much for coming to Idaho. Your bravery is amazing. Thank you. I was wondering if you have advice for parents who have kids that are out there in the world and experiencing a lot of the same pressure I'm assuming that you had to enter this transitioning world. Is there any good advice you can give?
Well, I don't know how old your kids are. I'm assuming they're still under the age of... So, My advice would be to, well, first of all, to be as involved as you can be in your kid's life and to let them know just how much you love them. But also to be very careful about their use of the internet and social media, and to monitor what they're looking at, how much time they're spending on it, and who they're interacting with.
So Chloe, I have a question for you. What about our kids who know other kids who might be experiencing gender dysphoria? What would you say to our kids on how to be a good friend to someone who might be experiencing gender dysphoria?
It's kind of a tough one. I haven't really answered one like that before, but
That's okay, we can move on.
no, I'll think on it.
Okay.
I mean, personally, I do have some friends now from school who identify as transgender, and well, one of them is really upset with me over me speaking out about my experience and against the practice of transitioning kids. My advice would be to let your friend know that you care for them, that you love them, and that you want to look out for them. But to be honest with them, to have honest discussions with them, and not to lie to them about themselves.
It's a perfect answer.
Hi, Chloe. Thanks again for coming. When you were saying you were getting a little bit depressed on how you felt and how your body felt, I think you were feeling, you weren't suicidal, but you felt bad. Did any of the therapists or doctors ask you what might have happened to make you feel that way? Because you were feeling, you said there was an experience in 8th grade. Did anyone try to work with you more on an experience from the past that might have helped you cope with what your body was doing?
Yeah, the problem is that the feelings around my body weren't explored, and that incident with having been assaulted in 8th grade actually happened while I was in the process, after I started to medically transition. It didn't happen before my transition, and at the time I kind of just saw it as like a boys being boys type thing, that if I wanted to be a boy, then I had to man up and just suppress these feelings. And I felt even then that even if I did want to speak out, I couldn't, because if I brought this up to the school, then I knew they would probably just give the kid a slap on the wrist, and something worse could happen to me if he came back to school. I didn't even recognize it as an assault at the time. And it took me a few years to really process just what happened. And I feel like this is part of the problem. Partly because I was so young, but I was also traumatized by it. And it's hard for somebody of that age to really introspect and figure out what happened and how it's really affecting them.
We've got another question over here for you. And any young people, I want to make sure that any young people get their chance to ask a question too.
What is your advice for people that are going through this right now?
I feel like it does vary for the individual. I think for kids, and especially those under the age of 18, I think the best thing to do really is to wait, to try and explore these feelings without any intervention. Because when you're a kid, you're really not capable of making informed decisions on long-term, lifelong decisions. I mean, it takes experience in the world, and even just going through your natural development in order to do so.
So many questions. You holding up okay? Okay, you're doing great. Such deep, thoughtful questions. Okay, right here.
Hi, Chloe. Thanks for coming to Idaho. I'm curious what you think. I'm listening to all this, and I'm thinking about all the grown-ups in your life. Now, I'm not talking about your parents, because I don't know them. I don't know what pressures, but there's a lot of grown-ups around who probably should have known better. Therapists, lawmakers, those who do-gooders, and it makes me angry thinking about all these grown-ups who have let you down. What should we think about this process? What would fix the environment so that the grown-ups are encouraged or incentivized to do the right thing? Is there anything you want to say or anything you want to address about that?
I mean, there are a lot of people who want to speak out against this. But really, the biggest reason why they don't is because it's because of fear. They're afraid to speak out. I mean, there's parents out there who have children who present to them with dysphoria, and they're at risk of losing custody of their child if they don't affirm their kids. And these doctors, these teachers, if they don't do the same things, they could possibly lose their job. But if people don't get past their fears, this won't be resolved.
Chloe, I come from a medical background, so I didn't know if you felt comfortable sharing with us some of the side effects that you are now dealing with and how that is affecting your everyday life now.
While I was on the blockers, I experienced some menopausal symptoms, namely like itching all over my body and hot flashes. And they were intermittent. I had no way of predicting when these would happen, so I mean, most women go through that between the ages of 50 to 60 and later. And I was experiencing this as a 13 to 14-year-old. And those side effects stopped a while after I went off the blockers, but it's left me with joint pains, namely in my arms, my limbs, and my back and neck. I've experienced more serious complications from the testosterone and the surgery, though. Namely, urinary tract issues from the testosterone. Since I've started on it, and even after going off of it, I've been prone to infections, dehydration. I have to use the bathroom pretty frequently, and these are side effects that were not listed on the consent forms. It's very possible that it could have affected my fertility as well. I don't know if I'll be able to conceive children, or even if I am able to conceive a child, if I'll be able to safely birth, because my body hasn't developed as it should. I mean, I most certainly won't be able to breastfeed because my breasts are gone, and even if they did leave behind some breast tissue for the purposes of contouring, but it's not enough to feed a child, and they severed the ducts through which the milk goes, so. And from the surgery, as part of the surgery, they used skin grafts. And 2 years afterward, I mean, I thought for a while that it was healing relatively smoothly, save for that the skin was dry on top, but it's started to fail. I won't go into too much detail because it's already a pretty disturbing topic, but I've had to wear bandages over my chest daily.
Thank you for coming to Idaho, Chloe. And I am an educator. And my question for you is that if you ever have any kind of a guidance, or did you ever trust any of your teachers about what you were going through? And of course, California is a very liberal state. You can expect that. But, did you have any kind of a guidance about gender fluidity right there, or transgender issues? And did you ever trust anybody there? What about your parents?
For me, this mainly occurred on social media. The topics of sexuality and gender identity were never brought up in class. I mean, I lived in a relatively conservative area of California, but it was not something that I really ever brought up to any teachers. And it wasn't until I was in high school that I had like my name changed in the school files. But my parents, I mean, at first they were actually against it. They were fine with doing things like cutting my hair and wearing boys' clothes and going by another name. But they didn't want me to make these permanent decisions at an age when I wasn't really equipped to. Their hand was forced by the doctors. Under the threat of suicide. And I had never told the doctors that I was suicidal.
Chloe, I want to thank you for coming to Idaho like many others have. And I want to encourage you. You mentioned about having children and the effects. And I want to encourage you that if that does happen for you, it can be a very wonderful blessing, even if you can't breastfeed that child. Many people adopt and have very close relationships with those children. And it is going to be a beautiful experience for you.
Thank you.
And I feel very much so that God is using you and this experience, and He has His hand on your life.
Yeah, a few close friends of mine are adopted, and they're some of the brightest and just greatest people I've met. So I suppose even if it came to that and I couldn't conceive, that it would still be great. I guess I'm just upset that the option was taken from me when I was perfectly healthy before.
Absolutely. Chloe, we do have a question from upstairs. Somebody's asking if you know how much the doctors make on these kinds of surgeries.
I'm not sure how much they made on mine specifically, but some of the figures I've seen for the transition of one person alone are up to about $300,000 just per patient.
I'm here as a mom, and I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to stand up and speak what you believe after going through it. So thank you for being willing.
Thank you.
If you went back to your 15-year-old self, you've got all your friends that are supporting you, you're big in the community, everybody's saying, rah, rah, do the thing. And the day before your mastectomy, and somebody came up to you and said anything, what would it have taken to dissuade you or to give you hope that there could be something different?
I mean, it's kind of difficult to answer hypothetical questions like this, but if somebody just told me that, I feel like if somebody just told me that, it doesn't have to be this way, but I don't have to do this to myself, and no matter what I did, I would still be biologically female at the end of the day. If somebody just gave me the reality of things, I think that would have helped greatly.
Chloe, I just want to thank you so much for the bravery that you walk in, the courage that you have to speak with the voice that God gave you. I was praying for you last week when I knew you'd come to our church, and I kept hearing over and over again that your voice matters for such a time as this.
Thank you so much.
You are a powerful force. You are a powerful force right here and right now. And what God has in store for you is going to blow your mind. He's going to bless you for your obedience. Your voice isn't going to be quieted. It's going to get louder and louder. And I just want to honor you and thank you. And we love you here in Idaho.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chloe, I'm so proud of you. I've watched you on Glenn Beck, and I have forwarded to everybody I know that interview. You have such grace and poise, and I'm so proud of you, so happy to be here. And I have one question. Were you ever able to affirm the endocrinologist and go back to him? And is he still working?
So I haven't been able to, I haven't had a consultation with him since, but I looked at my files recently, and apparently he is no longer with my healthcare provider. My two guesses were either that he was fired for not affirming his younger patients, or he just got so many patients my age and just didn't want to keep dealing with that, and so he decided to leave. I can't know for sure, though, because I haven't spoken to him, but I've been considering reaching out to him.
Okay, last question.
Chloe, first of all, I've said it before. Thanks for coming here. It's amazing. You got a very powerful story, and I'm honored to have you here and listen to you tonight. My question as a legislator, being a very young child, very impressionable, how much influence do you think those in authority, school officials, legislators, and those leadership in the trans community were being, how much of an influence do you think that had on you making the decision to make the change?
Sorry, could you rephrase that?
No problem. Basically what I'm getting at is, being very young and impressionable, how open were you to basically the influence to push you into the direction of going through the change? Instead of, would it have been more helpful to find those in authority that you probably looked up to affirming that you are a girl and trying to help you in your process of gender dysphoria and getting you through it, instead of, no, your symptom, the only way to cure it is to go through the transition?
It would have helped greatly. I mean, the way I saw it, the way it was presented to me by the research I did personally, and what I heard from the doctors was that this is a condition, that this is just how things are, and it needs to be treated just this way.
Chloe, this is my darling daughter. So if we can fit in one more question, please.
Yeah.
What was the impact on your family?
So, over the course of my transition, my relationship with my siblings, especially my older brothers and my parents, it suffered. And it got worse the further I got into it. And after I detransitioned, there still was sort of a strain, but my parents, they saw that I was suffering, and I think just their care for me. I mean, there was a period of time when I didn't even want to get out of my bed, and I would just stay in my bedroom for, I'd say maybe about like a week or longer, and they would just come up to my door and just offer me food and snacks and some words of support, and that's really what kept me going through that. And the longer I've just been living in reality, the better I've been getting, and so is my relationship with my family.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Let's give her one more round of applause. All right. So as we close tonight, I want to tell you, this heroic young woman has been up for the last 17 hours to get here to speak to you. Now the question is, you've all heard something, you've learned something, and probably, if you're like me, you felt something. But the question I have for you is, what are you going to do about it? Because if you just listen and hear and feel, it does nothing. Nothing changes unless we change it, okay? The bill that Chloe has inspired is up in the legislature in a few days. I'm not sure we're working on that. But if Chloe can do what she did tonight to help you understand this issue better, you can contact your lawmaker and ask them to support that bill. Will you do that for me and for Chloe tomorrow so we can get this bill passed? Thank you so much for coming tonight. We're so grateful for the Valley Church team. Thank you for being here. We don't know the bill. Talk to Bruce Skog from Nampa. He's running it. Your lawmakers should be co-sponsoring it. Ask them why they're not, if they're not. Let's give it up one more time for Chloe Cole.